Welcome everyone. Jonah and I are just catching up on current news as we are ahead of tasting these three wonderful Frog Sleep wines. We hope that you have at least one in front of you. We'll be going through the Sauvignon Blanc and then the Zinfandel and the Estate Cabernet Sauvignon from Rutherford. So please drink along and don't wait for us to do so. My name's Alicia Barrett. I'm with Benny's Beverage Depot. I'm a wine educator. And today is, of course, Earth Day. And with a lot going on globally right now, but especially as we look at warming temperatures, as we look at frost hitting Western Europe, devastating numbers coming out of France. We look at the droughts in California. Now more than ever, we thought it would be excellent to bring in Jonah Beer of Frog Sleep because he really is an industry expert in a lot of kind of organic and dry farming practices. He's going to lead us through kind of what Frog Sleep has been doing well before many others. Of course, tell the story of the winery, walk us through the wines, and answer all of your questions about how Frog Sleep and the wine industry as a whole is responding to climate change and what's going on. So thanks for joining us. And Jonah, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. And a big thank you to Benny's for just being one of the last great, amazing, independent retailers in a marketplace where you guys bring so much to the people of Chicago and the whole Chicagoland area. I mean, it's 20, I don't want to say how many years ago, because I don't want to date both Barbara and I, but I met her a long time ago, and we've been tasting wine together and sharing wine together for a long time. And what you guys do at Benny's for your customers is been fantastic. And I've been to a lot of parts of the country where they don't have a retailer like you guys, and it's a real shame for those guys and a real blessing for everyone that gets to spend time with you all. So keep it up. We certainly need you guys in the world because we need independent retailers telling cool stories, small family wineries like ours to bring a voice and a narrative to those of us that would otherwise get lost in the shuffle. So thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Benny's. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonah. Very kind. We're opening a new store actually in a couple months, so we look forward to having you back out in the Illinois market as soon as it's safe to do so.
Hey, I'll be there even before it's safe. I don't give a crap. At this point, I'm ready to go. Like, I need some Italian beef. I need some Italian beef, some Chardonnay, and you know what a great city Chicago has become over the last 10 years, especially from a food and wine standpoint. It's a mecca in our country of like just amazing places to eat and discover food and wine and to just enjoy it. And because it's Midwest and it's not New York and it's not LA, where it is kind of stuffy and angry, there's like a generosity. There's a real hospitality generosity to the restaurants in Chicago. And I miss it dearly. It's been a year for me and I can't wait to get back.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I've been in Chicago for just over 3 years, Jonah, and I completely feel the same way. And it's a wonderful community, especially in the wine industry here. So yeah. Hopefully we share some of that sense of hospitality in our stores. And please come in and visit some of these great Frog Sleep wines. So with that, Jonah, I think you have a few slides for us to walk us through kind of the founding of Frog Sleep. And then we're going to get into, of course, given our theme for today, farming practices and so forth. For those watching on Zoom, please submit any questions via the chat function or Q&A function. I'll be watching those. And for those watching on Facebook, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks for tuning in and grabbing some wine with us. Hey, while we go through these, I'm going to be drinking Sauvignon Blanc. So here's to you all. Don't slow down. Don't stand on ceremony. Get it pouring and let's have some fun. And Alicia, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share some screen because, got to do that. Listen, I promise not to bore everybody with too much of the screens and the slides. But Alicia, can you see what's up on is it showing a picture of me about 20 pounds ago?
Yes, that looks perfect.
All right,
well,
good.
Not that you don't look great now, Jonah.
No, I appreciate you saying so, but certainly you can see, boy, what this year has taken a toll. First of all, I want to invite everybody that's watching, and Alicia, especially you and the team at Benny's, to come and visit me at Frog Sleep sometime. Come and hang out. When you drive down the driveway to come visit us, this is the old barn that we inhabit where we make our wine. And the best part is underneath there, we've got a deep wine cellar and a terrible inventory control system. So it is great. It's the perfect place to hang out and drink wine. That was actually built in the 1800s. It's one of the old ghost wineries of Napa that we took over in the 80s. And so, but these are the two heroes of our story. This is John Williams on the right and Rory Williams on the left. Father and son, you can figure out which is which. John started Frog Sleep in 1981. He's been the winemaker for every vintage of every Frog Sleep wine ever. 41 years of the same guy at the helm, quite literally making these wines. And Lisa, this is not the story. Like, John did not have any money coming into this, right? Like, he was dead broke when he started this. So he has to be the winemaker at Frog Sleep because he needs a job, right? You know, I mean, it's either be our winemaker or he's got to go work for Groff, you know, like he's got no options. And the best part is that because he's done that, his son, Rory, who spent time working for Domaine du Jacques in Burgundy and Vuertio and Barolo and wineries in South America as well.
No big deal. No big deal, Jonah.
Yeah, I know. Listen, this kid had it right, man. He went and worked for the right people. But, you know, he didn't get paid shit for any of them. Sorry, he didn't get paid at all by any of those. But what he got out of it was a tremendous amount of experience that he brought back to Frog Sleep. So now it's father and son working as a duo to make the wines. But if we go back in time, man, there's John in the little white shirt there in the Polaroid. That's him with his original partner, Larry. Larry was an ER doctor in Santa Rosa, and he was supposed to be the money behind the operation. And John went to Cornell and got a degree in enology and viticulture, so he was supposed to be the brains. But Larry was already on to his third divorce, so he was broke. And John barely made it through Cornell. So let's say there wasn't a lot of money and maybe there wasn't a lot of brains. But they each pitched in $5,000 to start Frog Sleep in 1981. And they started with 247 cases of Sauvignon Blanc. So the 2019 Sauvignon Blanc that you've got in your glass is 39 years of Frog Sleep Sauvignon Blanc. And oddly enough, still making it in the same way that they did back there in the 80s, all stainless steel tank fermented and aged. So it's bright and crisp and clean and refreshing and all that kind of stuff. But it started out on a shoestring budget. I mean, not even a shoestring budget. You know that little plastic thing at the end of your shoestring? That's the budget they had. That's what they had. That was the entirety of the summation. There's John with the very first harvest of Zinfandel that following year. And then there's on the right are some 4 wine labels. So when these guys were getting started, they had scraped together every penny they had, and they only had $300 to hire someone to be a designer for the label. Well, turns out that was not near enough. You know, it's $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to get a label designed back in the 80s. They had $300. So they actually hired a kid who was a design student working at a 7-Eleven in Santa Rosa that Larry knew through his sister. And they paid him $100 and a case of unlabeled Sauvignon Blanc. And these are the 4 labels that he gave him as examples. Obviously, you can see which one we picked and we went with it. Turns out it was considered the biggest breakthrough in graphic design. It's in the permanent display at the Smithsonian Institute. It was considered the biggest breakthrough in graphic design. This kid, he was known as Chuck when we hired him. Now he's Charles, and he gets paid a whole lot of money. But all of this was this idea of, hey, we're doing this out of a passion, out of a love for this variety, Sauvignon Blanc, for this idea of making wines in a certain way. And then we found ourselves in 1985 with the first opportunity to start farming our own land. And this is what brings us up to why we're here today. And I think we could be here today for 2 reasons, really, Alicia, if we think about it. It's Earth Day, which is great. We should be celebrating the things that we've been doing. But yet all the things that we do to fundamentally feed our soil and feed the vines and take care of the environment and the earth that we get to farm, it's also to make the best possible wine we can. So we could be here on Earth Day doing this, or we could be here on really dang good wine day, right? Because everything that we do is actually first and foremost about enhancing the wine itself. And what we've discovered since 1989 is the two go hand in hand. if you do things that are destructive to your environment, heavy uses of applications of glyphosate and Roundup, or DET, the things that killed the California condor, or any of the kind of heavy pesticides that were used in the 70s and 80s after the petrochemical revolution, your vines didn't live as long, your fruit wasn't as healthy, your environment suffered, and so the quality of your wine went down. If we discovered that the single greatest wine I've ever had in my life, 1947 Cheval Blanc, was as good as it was because it was made with petrochemicals and diesel fuel, I'd be like, well, let's try that too. But what we know is it was made without the use of anything, with no irrigation, with no herbicide, with no pesticide. And the same thing is true today with the Richebourg that you'll find at Domaine Mayo Camazet, or the Barolo Mascarello in Barolo. All of these wines are made without any connecting, without any man-made interference. In fact, there's no irrigation, there's no fertilizers, there's no disturbing of the soil. And that's what we started to learn in 1985 when we started to farm ourselves. And look, it wasn't through divine right, Alicia. We didn't wake up one day and go, we know how to do it. We learned because we screwed it up first, right? Mm-hmm. We started farming our first vineyard with a company called Crop Care, which was giving us tons of herbicides and pesticides and sprayers, and we added irrigation. And then we saw red blotch, and we saw leaf roll virus, and we saw nematodes, and we saw oak root fungus. 3 years of farming it with a master's degree from Cornell led us to declining health in the vines and poorer tasting wine. And thankfully, the owner of the vineyard that sold it to John showed up and said, what the heck are you doing? And why are you ruining my old vineyard? And it was then that we reversed course. And we started farming what, in the time, no one even knew what we were going to call it, but it was organic, right? Mm-hmm. And Frog's Leap became one of the first certified organically grown vineyards in all of California in 1989. And what we're looking at in these photographs are kind of some examples. What John and Rory are standing in here is cover crop. And now my grandfather I'm from Indiana, so born and raised near South Bend on a corn, soybean, and wheat farm. So, farming the way I grew up was maximizing your bushels per acre, right? When I first told my grandfather that the best way we were going to make wine was getting less grapes per acre, he pulled his hair out. He didn't understand any of it. I think he called me not a farmer, was exactly the words he used. Now, he would look at that and he'd say, why is the owner standing in a big pile of weeds? But that's not weeds. The plants on the right are wild mustard that voluntarily show up every year. They dig holes deep into the soil and they make moisture voids where rainwater can soak in. What John is standing here on the left is a mixture of legumes like Austrian winter peas and purple vetch and wild oats, and all sorts of things that gather nitrogen from the atmosphere and put it on their roots in the form of these little nodules that feed the soil and therefore the vine in a very balanced way. And then we have integrated pest management. You can see this bluebird box over Rory's shoulder, and then the picture of the bluebirds themselves. That's a nesting pair of bluebirds that live in that box, and they take care of a tremendous amount of pests on our behalf, like leafhoppers, which don't really have a huge effect on the vines, but they can be quite a disruptive little bug. So we learned that doing these things allowed our vines to live longer. We stuck with it. And that's when we started to really come up with a better version of what organic farming is. And Alicia, we hear this a lot, and we see organic splattered about on everybody's marketing material. But what is it fundamentally? And to me, fundamentally, it's about feeding the soil, not the vine, right? Because the vine's smart. It's a sentient being. It knows what it's trying to do. Actually, trivia question for you, Alicia. Vitus Vinifera. Vitus Vinifera is, of course, the grapevine that we use to make wine. When did Vitus Vinifera outcross from its parent variety to become the grapevine that we know today? How many years ago did Vitus Vinifera become Vitus Vinifera?
Oh, I have no idea, but I'm going to guess.
Throw out a wild ass guess.
Okay. Let's go like 400.
400 years ago. Okay, good guess. It's a little bit further. It's about 35 million years ago.
Oh,
And here's the best part, Alicia, is 35 million years gave it a chance to develop a tremendous amount of wisdom about what it's trying to do. And remember, none of these grapevines care about Robert Parker giving it 100 points or making me rich, clearly. What they care about is attracting a bird to eat the berry and take the seed and, let's say, deposit it, is the way of putting it,
yeah.
down the road, right? That's the entire goal of the grapevine. It's got a procreation or a sex function. Then it has the ability to try to expand its own homestead. And that's why it tries to grow every year. It's so smart and it's got so much wisdom that I don't really need to tell it anything, right? We all think that, oh, if I can teach it how to farm by iPhone, I'll be better off. We've discovered that's not the case. The truth is that technology tends to give us a false sense of our own knowledge in place of the wisdom of the vine. And what organic farming does for us is it focuses where it should be, on creating a good environment for the vine to live in so that it can draw the nutrition it needs, the water it needs, and the wisdom that it needs. And wisdom's the key one, because grapevines are measuring things like the angle of the sun and the length of the day. That's how they know when to go through bud break in the spring and go into hibernation in the fall. It's not because I punched it into my iPhone and told them to do it. For 35 million years, they've followed the same sequence. They collect information from their surrounding that makes them wise. If we can come in and give them a rich environment to grow in, filled with fungus and mycelium and bugs and birds and rabbits and all sorts of things, then they communicate and they get better information. And here's the perfect example. Just look at these two vineyards, right? So this is me taking this photograph in February, looking at the property line. I'm standing on the property division line between a Frog's Leap Estate Cabernet vineyard and my neighbor's vineyard. Now, obviously, the Frog's Leap one is the one with all the pretty yellow flowers and looks verdant and rich and healthy. But I didn't poison my neighbor's vineyard. He did it himself, right? And you don't need to be a botanist. You don't have to be a Purdue University grad in the ag program to look at this and see the difference between the approach that my neighbor's taken, where you see this brown strip of land at the base of his vines. That's from the application of a pre-emergent herbicide called glyphosate, which has sterilized and killed that part of the soil. Mm-hmm. So that even when he plants grass in the middle, it dies as it gets closer to the vine. And because everything's dead there, there's something called a chelator. Now, chelator is like a little bug that lives, it's not really a bug, it's really a fungus, but it acts like a bug because it's got little claws. And what it can do is it can pinch off pieces of nitrogen or potassium or phosphorus or manganese, and it can pull that out of the soil and then run it over to the grapevine and trade it with the grapevine. And the important thing here is that when you use this kind of pre-emergent herbicide, you kill a little glyphosate. And when that happens, the farmer has to replace what Mother Nature would have given it with this little black hose, this little drip hose. Mm-hmm. That drip hose is an irrigation system filled with unnatural fertilizers like man-made or petrochemical-based nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium, or PPK sometimes it's called. But yet over here, just 25 feet away in the Frog's Leap vineyard, you have no irrigation, completely dry farm, no herbicides, no pesticides, and vines that will live longer. The average lifespan of the vines on the left is 12 years. The average lifespan of the vines on the right is 65 years. Yeah. So this difference, now you might say, Jonah, but he's so close, doesn't his thing get into your vineyard? Yeah, the answer is yeah. You see this little edge of the yellow vines, or the yellow mustard? I could have another row of grapevines right there, but then it would be too close to his. So we have to back up into our own vineyard and give his stuff more space to dissipate. So it's a real shame, to be honest. But.
So Jonah, just a quick question on that. Let's imagine he was on this call right now, and everything you're saying makes total sense. So what argument would he present to us to say why he's carrying out current practices? Is it cost, like labor efficiency, yield size? What would he say?
He'd say, first of all, he would say he lives in Aspen because he's a billionaire and he probably never visited his vineyard. He'd probably be the first time he's seeing it. to be honest. Second thing is he'd say, well, you can't leave it up to Mother Nature. You've got to make the choice for it. I tell the grapevine when it needs water. I know better than it does. He would say that my approach is too risky and that his approach is less risky because he takes control. But Alicia, that's the same bullshit argument we've been hearing since 1942. And you know what? It's never worked. It's never been true. It's an arrogant thought process to say that, but that's exactly what he would say. He would say he's risk averse. I would say he's not at all, that we are actually risk averse, because look at the drought we're in right now, Alicia. Lowest rainfall in 75 years. And you know what? When he turns on the hose and tries to get water out of this little black hose, it's going to be empty. And his grapevines have a root system now only 12 to 18 inches deep. They're not ready for this, but my vines, they've never gotten a drop of irrigation water in their life. They're actually more prepared for this today because they are paying attention. Now, look, if my grapevines only live 12 years and his live 65 years, I'd say maybe we've got something wrong, but it's the opposite. If I only got 1 ton per acre and he got 4, I'd say maybe we got something wrong. We both get 4. If I got really poorly tasting grapes and the critics called my wines garbage, I'd say maybe we got something wrong. We both do the same. Truth is that it's the difference between walking into a natural system and saying, I'm not the smartest guy in this vineyard, the vines are, or saying, I'm so much smarter than you, Mr. Vine. I'm going to give you food when I think you need it and water when I think you should drink it. That's the fundamental difference. And then everything just stems from that, right? Nothing then is left to chance in his world. And for me, I believe leaving everything to chance is actually less risky. Yeah. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, it most certainly does. We do have someone that has given us a question here asking who your neighbor is. Feel free to keep that one to yourself if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it to myself because it just might be on the shelf at Benny's. And you know what? God bless him. You guys should sell it. You should make some money on it. And here's the point, though, and to the person that asked the question, because it's the right question, and it's the question I would ask if I was on this Zoom. 60% of the Napa Valley farms the way my neighbor does. And 80% of California farms the way my neighbor does. So it could be a lot of people. And the point is that you go back to 1989 when we were first certified organic, and it was 1% was farming organic in Napa Valley. And it was us and Andy Hoxie and Spotswood. Now it's about 40% of Napa Valley is farming like Frog Sleep. So every year it's getting more and more, especially in the Napa Valley. There's a higher percentage of certified organically grown grapevines in Napa Valley, more than any other spot in California, more than Oregon, more than Sonoma. You know, we think about Sonoma and we love Sonoma, and everyone says, oh, Napa's the rich people and Sonoma's the hippies. There's actually a greater percentage of organic farmers now in Napa than Sonoma. And that's not a dig on them. That's just saying we've been at it for so long and we're a small valley. We're starting to see the results.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to, we screwed up our vineyard first. I told you that, man. We watched our vineyard almost die because of what we were doing. If you see that 2 decades in a row, you kind of learn to change things a little bit.
Yeah. Just one follow-up for you, Jonah, from Julia as well. She asked about having goats to eat the mustard greens, and maybe, more broadly, just kind of animal presence, if you want to speak to that.
I do. I love animal presence, and integrated farm animals is a big part of it. You see a lot of sheep. They call them the woolly weeders, and they go through and they eat everything. We actually plow ours under, which is a process that I'm actually now starting to second guess, to be honest. I'm wondering if we should leave it there for a longer period of time. So we're still learning every day here at Frog Sleep. But yes, I love having integrated farm animals. Typically it's sheep, and typically it's in the, about a week ago, we would have had them in there. We don't like them to eat the mustard when they're in the picture that we see because there's too much green growth going on, but we like them to come in a little later. And I actually brought in 3 Black Angus cows to another vineyard of mine and had Black Angus going through the entire winter, which was a really good integration technique to bring in a lot of fertilizer. 3 cows can fertilize a lot. If anyone grew up on a farm in Illinois or Indiana, you know what I'm talking about. but they also create a different alkaline kind of quality to the soil, which is can be very good. So I love integrated farm animals. We're not nearly as advanced in that as I would wish that we were, but it's something that we're working on every year.
Okay, thank you.
This is a good example here, Alicia, of like the dry farming in the summertime or in the late spring, early summer on the right, where you can see we've tilled in all the yellow mustards have got turned into the ground via plowing. But this is the result we're looking for. This vine on the left was planted in 1944. I mean, just think about that. World War II was still going on when that grapevine was planted. It's never had an herbicide, a pesticide, it's never had a fertilizer, and it's never had a drop of irrigation water. That's Cabernet Franc vine, and that goes into the estate grown cab, which we're going to have later. And you can get these old vines because they are deeply rooted. Another trivia question for you, Alicia, and I promise this one you'll probably get right. If the average root depth or the average deepness of the roots of an irrigated vine is 18 to 24 inches, how deep do you think the roots are on this old Cabernet Franc vine that we're looking at?
Oh gosh, I mean, maybe three times as much.
At least it's about 15 feet. So it's almost 7 times as deep. And here's the thing, this is why this vine lives so long, because 15 feet down, there's not the same things that can kill a vine. There's no such thing as phylloxera, for instance. There's no such thing as the impact of a nematode. All the things that can hurt a grapevine tend to live in the top 18 to 24 inches. So if you use irrigation and you get the roots up top, then you're going to end up with that kind of where you're putting the roots in the danger zone. If you dry farm in a climate like ours, the roots have to go so deep to find water that they end up getting out of the danger zone. And you might think, well, are they good at that? Vitus vinifera, remember that 35 million year ago outcrossing? That took place in present day Pakistan. So Vitus vinifera, the mother grapevine for Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet, Zinfandel, comes from present day Pakistan. And it can give you a full crop on as little as 12 inches of rain per year. These aren't vines that need a lot of water. And what we've discovered is they actually don't like having excess amounts. Does this make sense so far? At least a thumbs up if we're.
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Right.
Yes. Very well said.
Nice. I'm trying. Hey, let's talk about some Sauvignon Blanc here for a second.
Yes.
Why don't we do that? Let me do this and let me do this. All right, let's talk a little Sauvignon Blanc before we bounce back into some pictures. But I would love to hear your take on it, Alicia. Like right away,
Sure.
Boom, what are you smelling and tasting?
Well, I mean, we know Sauvignon Blanc is an aromatic variety, and this expression is no exception. It really jumps out of the glass. But I love, we're getting kind of our herbaceous pyrazine qualities, which I will have to say, sometimes it's always a little bit sad when we lose them, when they're ripened out and so the grapes are left on the vine a little bit too long, and we sometimes see that in some California Sauvignon Blancs. But we get it here, but alongside a lot of concentration of fruit, which is lovely.
You're so right. And thank you to the nice commenter who just said they like the info. That feeds my little nerd soul. So you're about to get more nerd information. You used a term that I want to make sure everybody understands that's watching, and the term you used is pyrazine. And it's a great term. It's the super intellectual som winemaker nerdy term, which I love and adore. And I'm so happy you used it. But I'd like to make sure that our audience understands that pyrazine is like using the color as like saying blue. And you mean all shades of blue, baby blue, Carolina blue, cobalt, turquoise. Like it's a huge category. And inside of that category are things like rosemary, lavender, iris, violet, dill, sage, bell pepper, jalapeno, cilantro, fresh cut grass. But just like blue is too broad of a category for us to really get our heads around, there's a subset of that category called methoxypyrazine. So now you're going from blues to a certain limited shades of blues. And then there's one, and this is the big one. Get ready, everybody. Write this one down. 2-isobutyl 4-methoxypyrazine. That's the one that drives us nuts. And that's the one that's
Say that 3 times fast there, Jonah.
It's too hard to say at once. 2-isobutyl 4-methoxypyrazine. And what it is it's the smell of jalapeno peppers and green bell peppers. And that's the smallest subset of a category. And Alicia, why would a grapevine ever create a flavor in its berries that is unattractive to animals? It doesn't make any sense. Turns out that is actually a natural insecticide that is used to repel aphids from drinking the sap of a growing or expanding grapevine.
I never knew that.
Yeah. In fact, if you go to the Home Depot and you go to the gardening aisle and you go to where you're going to get your fertilizers for your tomatoes, and there's aphid repellent, the second active ingredient is 2-isobutyl 4-methoxypyrazine, and it is synthesized out of Vitus Vinifera. When the grapevine is growing and it's expanding and it's trying to reach up a tree, there's sap running up and down its branches. That sap is rich in a sugar element called ATP. Well, along comes a little aphid, a little bug, and he lands on it and he sticks his little snout in there and he drinks and drinks and drinks. And he's like, oh, this is delicious. And the grapevine's like, gosh, dang it, what the heck, man? We're trying to get a leaf and you're drinking all our sap. So Vitus vinifera, and this was about 20 million years ago, discovered that it can break down some chemicals in its roots found in the soil, mix it together into this formula, send it with the water to the leaves and to the rachis and to the peduncle and all the parts of the grapevine, so that when the aphid lands on it and he sticks his little nose in there, he goes, ugh, jalapeno pepper, that's terrible, and he flies away. The grapevine was like, amazing, I did it. I got rid of all the aphids. Look at me. And then that fall, a bird came and tried to eat the grape and take the seed. And he went, ugh, this smells like jalapeno pepper. And he fled too. That's when a grapevine discovered its greatest trick of all. During its growing phase, it sends isobutyl methoxypyrazine to all parts of the vine. But just after veraison, when the grapes turn purple, or in green grapes, they create aromatics, it recalls it. Like a defective Pinto, it says, give me all that back. And you can watch the IBMP, this terrible bell pepper flavor, go from the leaves all the way back to the roots. And it's at that point you want to go harvest the grapes. And here's the thing, if you do it correctly, it's not, a lot of my neighbors, they don't just over ripen their grapes to get rid of that, they raisin their grapes to get rid of that. But a properly ripe grape will give you no jalapeno pepper, but all that kind of herb and sage and dill and lavender and all that stuff that makes wines interesting. And it all started because 30 million years ago, a grapevine learned how to become insect repellent. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and you didn't have to teach it to do it.
And I couldn't. I still don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I think that's what's so brilliant.
Yeah, it's a lovely wine, and it's so focused. The acid structure, again, which sometimes in some warmer places we see that kind of fall off slightly, but it's still so pristine.
Right.
Fruits, of course, are like grapefruit and really ripe citrus, nectarines, but all the way through to kind of some underripe tropical as well. And again, just kind of very sharp, but still round enough texturally that it kind of fills out your palate. So
and you're sweet to say so. I mean, I'm fully aware that I'm an acid junkie, and that like I want my Sauvignon Blanc to be razor sharp, right?
You want your enamel to strip away a little bit.
Yeah. If you have anything left in your teeth after a bottle of my SB, I did something wrong. And you know what? That's what makes it just so charming with food, right? Like you start to think about oysters. You start to think about, hey, let's go to Shaw's and let's get some crab and let's dive into this. Like to me, this is the wine that really begs for food, and hopefully everyone's got maybe a little something in front of them. But
yeah.
It's a fun one.
Quick question for you here that has come in from Elizabeth. Hi, Jonah. I've been a Frog Fellow for almost 10 years. We miss visiting you all terribly and can't wait to come back. I wondered what things are on the horizon at Frog Sleep, which I'm sure we'll get into, but also any new wines coming up. She did see your new chickens on Instagram.
Well, we do have a lot of new chicks, and come and see them while they're around, because in 2 years' time they'll be Coco Van, and so full circle, Hakuna Matata, circle of life, everything comes and goes. the chickens are a part of like the garden at Frog Leap. We have a pretty robust market garden and orchard where we use and we sell a lot of vegetables to local restaurants for their menus. And the chickens are great for integrated pest management throughout the gardens. We do have a new wine. This is breaking news because it's so breaking. I just learned about it yesterday and it's already in the dang bottle. So that just shows you what this year has done to all of us. We've all stopped communicating a little too much. But John's son, Rory, has made from some of our old vines the first ever red wine called Valdegee. Valdegee was misidentified in Napa for the longest time as Gamay. It is not Gamay, but it's very close. Okay. So he's making a red wine, Valdegee, bottled it yesterday. I saw it coming off the bottling line, which is how I knew it existed, and made 100 cases from old vines on our Rutherford Rossi vineyard. And it's pretty cool. It could have, for the longest time, we had been using it to blend into other wines like the Zinfandel at times, or sometimes when it wouldn't get ripe into the rosé. And this is the first time it's ever been made a standalone red wine on its own. And, you know, a part of that is because we have a love for these old vines, but also because we love the heritage and history of old Napa. You know, it's so easy to want to make another new estate cab or another new this and that, but like to go back in time and think about what they were doing in the 20s, 30s, and 40s is kind of a different approach. So when you come out to visit the winery next, and we are receiving visitors and the tasting room's open, so come on out. But when the Frog Fellows are there in about September-ish, you can ask to try the Valdegee and you'll be on the super inside track.
Excellent. Well, you heard it here first, folks. And, you know, that is really commendable additionally because, well, Cabernet from Napa commands a lot of money, so premium prices. So when you're, you know, willing to experiment and try Valdegee, yeah, that's awesome. So everyone go check that out. Very cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Hey, Alicia, I know this might seem out of sequence, but I'm going to suggest we do the Zinfandel next.
Right. Let's do it.
Okay.
Yep.
And I know that most wineries, you would taste Sauvignon Blanc, then Cabernet, then you'd have shots of tequila, and then you would get to the high alcohol Zinfandel. Our style of Zinfandel is much more, again, old school, old Napa. Think of the Zinfandels that were made by guys like Louis Martini back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Things like Ridge from the 70s. We do this purposefully. We use a blend of Zinfandel and Petit Syrah, and we allow the Petit Syrah to help lower the alcohol and lighten the wine. I know that sounds weird, but you can pick it early. Remember that green thing, isobutyl 4-methoxypyrazine, that aphid repellent?
Yes.
Petit Syrah can't make that. It doesn't know how. It never figured it out. So you can actually pick Petit Syrah whenever you want. It's never going to smell like jalapeno peppers or green bell peppers, which means it also has a problem with aphids, which is a whole nother topic. So we pick that at a very early stage at the same day that the Zinfandel is more advanced, and then we blend the two together and ferment them together. And the result is this much more fruit-driven, fresh, bright, lively style Zinfandel. Yeah, and I know that someone...
Sorry, there's just so much florality too on it. And sometimes when I go into a Zinfandel, you know, you kind of think of the very characteristic kind of ripe and then some tart fruits, but and a little bit of spice. But here I'm really pleasantly surprised by all the purple flowers that you immediately get. And it's very lifted on the palate in terms of the texture.
And the amazing thing is we're using Petit Syrah to lift it up. I mean, we're picking Petit Syrah at 19 degrees Brix, which is, of course, absurdly low, right?
Very low, yes.
Very low. But so it's got a pH of like 3.27, an acid that's out of the stratosphere. And you mix that with Zinfandel that's at 24 or 25 degrees Brix, and you're going to get that kind of lifted, bright punch from the Petit Syrah, but you're going to get the kind of fruitedness that we want from the Zinfandel. Yeah. And I love your comment about flowers and florality, because there's a lot of iris, purple flower, violet kind of quality. And that's mostly indicative of the fact that the heart and soul of our Zinfandel is grown in the shade beneath the Mayacamas mountain range, right at the base of the Mayacamas. And when it's grown in shade in this way, it creates more of that purple flower kind of quality. And that's a topic for another time when we talk about carotenoids and the breakdown to beta ionone. But we're going to save that one. So that way you have to have me back. That way
Okay.
there's no chance you
We'll
can't
do
have me
part
back.
2 in a couple months. We'll give everyone time to spell and look up all the words that you've used so far. Get those
Yes.
committed to memory, and then we'll do part 2.
That sounds good. And I know someone wanted me to spell Valdegee. No, I'm not going to do it. Can't do it. It's impossible. It's got an accent to go over the E. I can tell you that. Valdegee. If you Google it, you'll find it. But boy, it's a rare one, and it's kind of cool. It does taste a lot like Gamay. If you're wondering, Alicia, it does taste a lot like Gamay.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've never had it. I don't know of it, but I love Gamay, so I think I'll be a fan.
You'll probably be a fan.
Yeah.
You'll probably be a fan. That's so great. Zinfandel, fresh, bright, lifted, floral. Coming in, what is this? I'm sorry, I'm looking off camera here, but I'm trying to find the alcohol. 14.3. Now that is probably the lowest Zinfandel and ABV that you're going to find on the shelf there at Binny's. And we don't do that on purpose. It's just the result of this kind of more lifted approach. And by the way, it will age forever. This is Zinfandel. I just opened up the other day because we have that terrible inventory control system. 1989 Zinfandel. I mean, think about that. 1989, that's 30 years old, and it was just stunning. Now,
Jonah,
look, it had lost.
That was the year I was born.
All right.
So old that one.
How do I mute Alicia on this? I don't want to hear this kind of bullshit anymore. I care. You're so successful and you're so young. Oh, you drive me nuts. I love you. I love you, Alicia, but you drive me nuts.
Quick question here, though, on the Petite Syrah edition. How long have you been doing that? I mean, I think it's brilliant. Like the picking early, the Petite Syrah, adding that in. When did you figure that out?
1989.
Oh,
and
okay.
We didn't figure it
right
out. Our first vintage was we made a little 1981, but not really till 1983 did we really dive into Zinfandel. And then, but it was Louis Martini who really discovered it and taught us that trick. So I would love to take credit on behalf of John, but no, we, like every good idea, we stole it. And, you gotta love it. I think that it changes the modern day perception. And look, as you just told us, you're very young. I remember when Zinfandels went through a transition with the 1994 vintage. That's when they were Larry Turley released his first Zinfandel that scored 100 points. Was 1994. It came out in 1996, and it was 15.5% alcohol and smelled like Amarone, and everybody went crazy for it. And that next year was 1997, one of the hottest years in the 90s. And so everybody that grew Zinfandel said, oh, well, that's the key, just go super ripe. And so all of a sudden, over 1 year, almost the entirety of California's Zinfandels went from being what we call a field blend, like what we make, to being a 100% Zinfandel, very ripe, 16, 17. I saw a Zinfandel the other day that was 18.5% alcohol. Now, I mean, that's just like you might as well, it can give you a ball peen hammer to hit yourself on the head. It's just so much. And maybe they're successful and maybe they fly private and I'm flying on Southwest, but I'd rather make this style of Zinfandel and have a little more liveliness to the wine.
Yeah. They don't serve this on, they're not bringing this on the plane. So you're good. You can check your wine suitcase of Frog Sleep for free.
I do. Southwest, man. I love you guys. Send me a free ticket. I keep it up. I'm going to pour some Cabernet, and then I want to jump back into the pictures for a minute because I want to really help everyone get a view on where we're at and where especially this Cabernet Sauvignon is coming from. Because Alicia, for a winery that started in 1981 with $10,000, no one ever thought we'd own any land at all. Actually, no one ever thought we'd be here today. So we've already beaten the odds. And then no one ever thought we would have Cabernet Sauvignon, estate grown, Rutherford appellation. Everybody, I hope you understand. Rutherford still holds the record in California for most expensive land for grapes. The Rutherford Bench still sits at over $1 million an acre. It's ridiculous. We bought, thankfully, back when we could afford little bits, and we had people selling it to us at prices we could afford. But we are so fortunate to be able to have this Grand Cru-esque. I know you were just selling some Burgundy, Alicia. This is for us. This would be somewhere between Musigny and Richebourg is kind of where this particular vineyard would sit. And I think that it's, well, I'll show you. It's easier to show you. Let's go here. I'm sorry, I have to narrate everything I do because I get lost. Are you seeing this right now? Is it showing up?
Yep.
Oh, cool. All right, good. So how's that?
Yes, now you're good.
All right. So this is, by the way, Frog Sleep today. There's some of the sheep in the background and some of the chickens, and everything's done by hand from pruning. We talked about this before we started a little, Alicia. This is cane pruning at its best, but this guy in the photograph with the cool skull and crossbones ball cap, he's been pruning that particular row of vines for 22 years. He knows those vines intimately. He knows everything about them. He knows which ones are vigorous, which ones are slow starters, which ones need more work, which ones need less. And that experience gives us a higher quality product. And then down in the lower left-hand corner, what you're watching is Freddie, who's budded. And, you know, grapevines aren't grown from seeds, they're grown from cuttings, right? So you plant a rootstock, a grapevine from upstate New York or West Texas, and then you cut into it and you put in Cabernet or Chardonnay or Merlot or whatever you want. We do all of it by hand and only from our own vineyards. And that's called Sélection Maisel or Maisel selection, where you're picking the best of what you have. And then this is Martine. He's my boy. This guy, he's got a tattoo on his neck of a bunny and it's crying. And I'm always like, why is the rabbit crying? I don't understand, Martine. He looks like he'll thrash you, but he's the sweetest little puppy dog. But he always overpicks. I'm like, you don't need to pick him that full, buddy. So he's just showing off. But that's kind of Frog Sleep today. Here's a little Google Earth look at where we're at. So on the right is Frog Sleep, the winery. What we're looking at, by the way, this portion of Napa Valley is the Rutherford portion. Not exactly, but pretty darn close to the Rutherford portion. We have three grapes that we grow exclusively in Rutherford. Right next to the winery where it says Frog Sleep is where we grow our Merlot. Where it says Galeron, that's where we grow our Sauvignon Blanc. And where it says Rossi is where we grow our estate Cabernet Sauvignon. And Alicia, you see this road here that my little mouse is trailing up? That's Highway 29.
Okay. Yeah.
To the west of Highway 29, at the base of the Mayacamas Mountains, this is the prized Rutherford Bench. This is where you're going to find everything from Old BV, George de la Tour, Vineyard Number 3, to Inglenook, to Scarecrow, to Donna Estate, to Stagland, to blah, 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 to blah, blah, blah. This is the $1 million an acre kind of stuff. And we're fortunate that our Cabernet Sauvignon comes from this one called Rossi. It was planted in the 1800s, planted in 1868 by the Norton family and purchased by the Rossi family in 1903. It's some of the oldest Cabernet Sauvignon in the Napa Valley and the oldest in Rutherford. This is the Rossi family right after they got electricity, which was a big deal for the family. They got electricity. And Louise Rossi is the little girl standing off to the side, and you can't really see her. But that was Louise then. This is the vineyard now. We purchased it from them in 2007. And we did a lot. They had a lot of old vines, but they had a lot of empty land that we planted to Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, a little bit of Merlot. And this is the water tower, painted and looking pretty. But this is my favorite. That's Louise in the chair. Now, we saw her as a little girl in the sepia-toned picture, but there she is, 99 years of age. She made it to 99 years and 11 months. She grew up her
Oh.
entire life on that property, from the day she was born to the day she died in that same house. Never married, never had any children. John is there proposing marriage for the 800th time, trying to marry her so we don't have to buy the vineyard. But she said no. That's John's daughter, Kelly. She's a lawyer with the state of California, does great work for the state, making sure that no one's incarcerated on bad evidence. So that's her job. That's Kyler. He works with the Lagunitas Brewing Company. He's more of a beer guy. And then Rory is the third child and the son that's involved in the business. But there's Louise. I think what she's yelling at John is that he's not paying her enough for her grapes. But she was kind of cheap, man. She could hear a nickel fall in the snow. She never met a dollar she didn't want to stuff in her mattress. And we love that about her. This was the old winery that they made wine from all through Prohibition. These guys were making bootlegged wine. They were making illegal wine. They were working with families in the Midwest that were sending out protectors for the wine. I mean, these guys were legit. This is an old basket press. And on the right, you can see it, Alicia, on the right, there's a big iron thing over it.
Yeah.
The press gets lifted up from the ground and pushed against that iron thing to squeeze out all the juice. And this whole contraption was made by the San Francisco Cable Car Company, the same people that make the streetcars that run up and down San Francisco. And we kept all this alive. That's a big redwood tank that they used to ferment and age the wines in. Just fantastic. And today, from her grapes, just from what Louise grew, we now grow and make one single estate-grown Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's the wine that's in your glass. It is, it's our version of an homage to the kind of Cabernet Sauvignon that I grew up loving 25 years ago, and why I wanted to get in this business, why I jumped in my car in Indiana and drove to the Napa Valley 25 years ago, was because I fell in love with a bottle of wine that changed my life. And it's not that they can't be made in a very modern style. I'm sure they can, but they never captured my heart in that way, and these wines did. So we wanted to make a wine that represented that style of the Napa Valley. Napa Valley circa 1955,
Yeah.
1895.
This is old Napa right here. It's so beautiful. And, for those, I'm looking now at the alcohol in this wine. If I can find it on the label.
We bury it. It's 13.8.
13.8. I would challenge a lot of people to go to the shelf and find some Napa Cabernets at 13.8 these days, because they far exceed it most of the time. And when you go into the glass, there's so many layers, and it's not just a huge dose of like really, really ripe fruit and oak. It's actually really savory and herbal on initially, and then you get fruit, but everything's really well balanced by acid kind of through the whole palate. And so there are definitely people doing this, but it's not modern. You're right.
There definitely are. And the great thing is if you're a fan of this style of wine like I am, and look, I'll name check as many as I can think of, but Kathy Corson and Steve Mathiasen and John Lockwood over at Enfield, and what my wife is making, like there's so much stuff going on now. The shift is going back to this style because they're more unique, right? And the thing that always upsets me about when I taste a Cabernet that smells and tastes like oak and vanilla and chocolate is that it's homogenized. Yeah. It could come from Calistoga or it could come from Carneros. It doesn't really matter. And that's a shame, because the world of fine wine is held up and regarded because of a handful of small tucked away corners of the earth where something extraordinary happens, right? Mm-hmm. Think about Burgundy and the Côte, right? A little crack in a tectonic plate that lifted one side above the other and created a small slope, exposing soils that never should have been exposed. On a dried up old ancient Jurassic seabed filled with seashells and limestone. Yeah. And some monks 800 damn years ago discovered if they put some grapes on it, that the Pope was really damn happy. You can't make this stuff up. This
Yeah.
is how we got here. And when you find those tucked away corners of the earth, it's our job, the way we see it, to preserve that uniqueness, to highlight it, to revere it. And that's why we make a cab in this style, something that is savory and high in acid and goes great with food and has a tension. Alicia, we talk about the salada as nerds. We call it the fruit and herb complex, where there's a tug of war going on for the soul of the wine. Am I fruity or am I herbal? Am I rich or am I delicate? Any great wine has that dichotomy, and if when you can capture it, it's not because we're good. Listen, I'm the first to admit it. I'm dumber than a bag of hammers, right? I can't figure this shit out. But I was smart enough to know that when we found gold in them darn hills, we preserved it and we didn't overshadow it with technique and tricks. Instead, we went the other way and we peeled back.
Well, that is definitely not true, and you're being very modest, as we all can see tonight. But I will say, oftentimes when I'm teaching classes for Binny staff, I always share how I really do feel like we're in the golden age of wine, and I'm so pleased with the quality of wine that's in the international market, the exchange of technology, of ideas, of money, of history and expertise. However, with that gift comes a risk, and we need to make sure that in that we don't, to your point, kind of homogenize wine and start to approach sourcing grapes from every place of the earth in the same way. And they all carry these really unique attributes of where they're grown, and we need to honor that and showcase that in the wine, and not just make what the latest trend is and suddenly have, Burgundy that tastes like Sonoma. And some people like to say, like, oh, it's Burgundian. I mean, you can be kind of Burgundian in style, right? But no, you're not. And that's a good thing. You need to show off your place and your terroir. And so I love that you guys honor that and want to showcase the land and what's unique about your estate property in Rutherford with this wine.
And we take a ton of inspiration from Bordeaux and Burgundy and Barolo and Tuscany and South Africa and Australia. But we take inspiration. We look at them and we say, what is it that I love about Chateau Pontet-Canet?
Yeah.
I don't want to try to make a version of Chateau Pontet-Canet because that's boring. That's just me copying someone else's work, right? Yeah. Instead, let's be smart and intellectual, and let's put our hearts out there and say, here's why I fell in love with this wine. And let me try to express that and then go, okay, I love it because it's transparent. It's not trying to be the biggest and loudest and brashest wine. It's more elegant. It's more of a poem than it is a blockbuster movie. Okay, well then how do I take then and say, now I'm going to interpret this with the same kind of nuance? That's where I find that the old masters are indispensable. Mm-hmm. But don't sit around and try to copy a Monet. Instead, draw inspiration from Monet and then go and make a Jackson Pollock or a Rothko or whatever is going to be your version of it. Yeah. But we should always respect and understand and honor the great masters. And man, in wine, here's the best part. Homework is getting drunk at night, baby. It's the best. Come on. You can't beat it. I love it. You can go on a Zoom and you can get some guy with gray hair and a little doughy around the jowls, and he'll make fun of the old guys, and we're gonna understand wines in a slightly different way. So I know my hour is up. I took the full time. I told you I wouldn't, but I totally did.
I so appreciate it, Jonah. You have been so informative and very entertaining. Thank you for sharing these beautiful Frog Sleep wines. Just to quickly run through for everyone watching, the Sauvignon Blanc is normally at $22.99. We actually have it on sale this month at $18.99. Wonderful wine, especially as we kind of get into some warmer weather and we're thinking about maybe some seafood and aperitifs and so forth. The Zinfandel on the shelf at $29.99. And lastly, the Estate Cabernet Sauvignon, the Estate Cap at $55.99, I think is really exceptional buy. So Jonah, thank you so much. You've been delightful. Wonderful to chat.
Thank you, Alicia. I appreciate it. And again, thank you to you and your entire team. Thanks to the Chicagoland area for being friends and family and come out and hang out with me in Napa. But definitely get your butt over to Benny's and load up on some Frog Sleep. And then maybe, you know what? I'm going to throw out 2 other wines to put in your bag. I'm going to actually do something I'm going to go ahead and say the names of some things that have been really exciting to me. And I hope you guys can find them there. 1, Ridge Zinfandel. Anything they make, put one in that basket right alongside everything Frog Sleep, because to me, what Paul Draper started and what they're making up there now are some of the best I've ever seen. And then my second one, I'm going to say, if you haven't checked in on them in a while, you got to check in on what's going on at Groff. Those are my buddies in Oakville. I love those guys to pieces. And I had a bottle of their cab the other night that just snapped my head back and made me think, man, that's Oakville interpreted in a way that I really appreciate. And I'm sure you can get them at Benny's. So get there, get the whole case. I bet if you get 12 bottles, you're going to walk out with a better price.
You get a little bit of a discount there, 10% off, yes. But Ridge is also on sale right now. So yeah, we love Ridge, love Groff. So yeah, visit us and check those out. Jonah, thank you. Appreciate it. Cheers and happy Earth Day, everyone. I hope you learned a little bit about what's going on at Frog Sleep and elsewhere as we celebrate this great planet that we're able to live on and reap the rewards of. Thanks, Jonah.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. We'll see you all soon. Thanks, Alicia.
Bye.
Bye-bye.